events that we have here. Upstate Intercollegiate Choral Invitational Festival that's coming up, and then other events that are happening. Ends with, on Friday, December the 2nd, Lessons and Carols at 7:30. We invite all of you to come. These are free events, especially to come to the Lessons and Carols. It's a great way to start the Christmas tradition. Traditionally, Lessons and Carols is done much closer to Christmas time, but because all of our students leave, we have to do that early. So come on, come be a part of it, and be a part of getting ready for Christmas time. I want you to know that there are restrooms in the lobby. If you need those, we would ask also that you would take the moment to silence your phones and to please refrain from flash photography during the program tonight. This time I'll ask you if you would join with me as we pray together. In my prayer, I want to incorporate an old Shaker hymn that's very appropriate for this evening. Not one sparrow is forgotten. Even the raven God will feed. And the lily of the valley from his bounty hath its need. God, we thank you that tonight nature and poetry and music and imagination can come together to remind us of the beauty of this world and also to remind us of our place in it. So, Lord, tonight as we are gathered here, I would ask that you would feed our hungry souls, that you would slake our thirsty minds, that you would soothe our troubled bodies, that after tonight we might see with new eyes both the creation and the Creator. This we pray in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Tonight we want to bring together some elements that we think are very important and are a part of the process of being in a university. Part of university life is to discover and to see connections, to not just study simply your discipline separate from others, but to bring them together so that we see the great depth and the rich variety that can happen when we make ourselves available to different disciplines. So tonight, you're going to hear poetry. Tonight, you're going to hear music. Tonight, you're going to hear lyrics. Tonight, you may even hear some prose. And all of these join together to help us understand how we think and how we act and react to all those things around us. It's our very distinct honor to have with us Dr. Drew Lanham. Dr. Lanham's a distinguished professor and master teacher at Clemson University. He's a native of South Carolina and proud of his Edgefield roots. His work seeks to connect those conservation dots in ways that helps others to see the value and the viability of caring for our earth. I know it's hard for me to call him Dr. Lanham. I know Drew in some other kind of context. I have sat under his teaching, both in the classroom and in the field, when we were discussing birding, and when I took courses that he was teaching on birding. And I found that he has even another area that he wants to pursue and push. And as a black birder, he's intrigued with how culture and ethnic prisms can bend the perceptions of our nature and of its care. He's sought after around the world for his knowledge and for his wisdom. He sits on many boards and is a man that many people want to have come and speak and share and interact with. For the last 2 years, he and I have been able to get together for the Christmas bird count. And so what happened the last 2 years that the quadrants that we wanted to cover, we were the only two to show up to do those. And so we would meet in Pendleton at 5:30 in the morning, and we'd start with owls, and then we'd work our way to ducks and birds that were other places, and till finally about 5:30 we were hitting some owls again if we could, and finishing at 6:30 in the evening. It's only with Drew Lanham that I would eat twice in the same day at the Awful Waffle in Pendleton. But we would do that, and I've had the opportunity to bird with him in other places, and he is a great birder, but even more, he's a great friend. We have great conversations. The other thing that happens sometimes when we're birding is that we can bird together for long periods of time and never say anything to each other. And I think that's part of the richness of having friendship and having the common understanding that we do. So it's our great pleasure to have him. You're going to hear from the choir. You're going to hear from some piano pieces. You're going to hear organ pieces, and we're going to interweave these with his readings. And so it's with great pleasure that we invite him to come up now. Give a great welcome to Dr. Drew Lanham.
Were I the sparrow, brown-backed, skittish and small, I would find heaven in thorniest thickets, search far and wide for fields lain fallow, treasure the unkempt, worship the unmown, and covered the wooed. I would slink between sedges, chip unseen from brambles, skulk deep within hedges, and desire the ditches grown wild. I would find greatest joy in the mist-sodden morning, sing humble pleas from the highest weeds, and plead for the gray days to stay. Thank you, Ken, for the warmest welcome and for friendship, and thank you all for being here this evening. It is with great pleasure and honor that I sit in front of you at this place at the invitation of my very good friend, Ken. And Ken and I join together in our passion for birds. And so what I would like to do this evening is share with you some of that passion. Maybe for you to come into a few of our conversations as we're on the back roads of Pendleton and Lesser Anderson. And so understanding how birds can bind us, mind, body, and spirit, I think is an important thing to consider. And so tonight I'll share with you some pieces from a book of poetry, my first chapter book of poetry called Sparrow Envy. And that first poem is a song really of admiration, a poem of admiration for the little brown birds that we often overlook. Those beings that are so small, so shy, that they often receive the least of our attentions. But all some of these birds have to do is sing, and suddenly our souls become brighter. I'll also share a little with you from my book, The Home Place. This is a piece from a chapter called Little Brown Icarus. Flight was my first fascination. I didn't understand why birds didn't have to worship the same God of all ways falling down that I did. If you watch a bird in flight, you'll feel an instinctual wondering, a questioning of how. Whether it be a pigeon's strong, direct line to push home through a canyon of glass and concrete, a hunting hawk's faithful float over a fallow field, or a hummingbird's miraculous hover in the search for sweetest sustenance, the astounding potential of a feather's lift cannot be ignored. The feathers that I found as a boy were special treasures fallen from the sky, tokens thrown earthward by heavenly beings. I discovered that if I held one of these gifts from a vulture or turkey out a speeding car's window, it always wanted to go up. Even when I ran with them in my little sweaty brown hands, I could feel the tiny forces of lift that made flight possible. All the feathers on a wing together make the magic happen. But there were other flying things that called me. Bats intrigued me. Universal kid knowledge suggested that they were really just rats with wings and could turn into blood-sucking vampires at night. Everyone claimed that bats' primary mission in life was to entangle themselves in women's hair. But I marveled at the erratic, fluttering flight that took them about the yard on a summer's eve. I wondered, though, how they flew without feathers. There was a huge mimosa tree in the backyard. It exploded with cotton candy-like flowers in the summertime, drawing in a kaleidoscope of butterflies. A melange of winged color danced about the pink profusion of blooms. I caught butterflies occasionally, not with a net, but by simply sneaking up on them as they fed, and quickly but gently grabbing their wings between my thumb and forefingers. Tiger swallowtails, monarchs, and many more species that I didn't know came under my close scrutiny. Sometimes the captive would unfurl its coiled-up tongue and tickle my palm for a salty taste of sweat. Bats and butterflies and birds, all of them blessed with wings, and me stuck in the soil with 2 arms and 10 fingers. And so I was a caramel-colored Icarus with a hard head, persisting in the fantasy that flying was something I was meant to do. While the word aerodynamic never crossed my lips or my mind at the age of 10, the elementary principles of flight were not lost on me. Run faster and increase thrust. Shed the shirt and decrease drag. Flap cardboard wings and increase lift. Swing higher, harder, faster. Eat less jelly cake and decrease weight. Nothing worked. In my envy, I watched birds fly, flutter, hover, soar, and sail through the air. Why should they have so much fun? How could something as fragile as a feather mean so much? I'd picked up lots of them, large, small, and of many colors, on rambles through the woods and fields. Azure-hued blue jay feathers, white-tipped and barred with black to advertise bravado. Dirty brown buzzard feathers, big, stiff, and strong. Tawny brown barred owl feathers, softened on the edge for silence. I marveled at the silky smoothness of their contours and sometimes stuck them in my nappy little afro, pretending to be part Sioux. I clutched handfuls of feathers in my sweaty hands and ran like the wind, but I never became the bird I wanted to be. If desire had meant flight, then I would have soared like an eagle.
I failed to mention that Drew has some of his books with him, and following this evening, he'll be in the lobby. You can purchase those books and have him to sign them if you would like. So when we're finished here tonight, I'm going to sort of whisk him out there quickly so everyone can greet him there instead of in the aisle here. So just wanted you to be aware of that. Now we're going to hear some piano music that's based on birds. Dr. Cindy Goodlow performed 4 compositions that were either inspired by birds or that mimic specific bird calls or bird actions. The first piece, titled Little Birds by Edvard Grieg, is written to imitate the call of the tiny Norwegian bird, the crested tit. This bird's song is a melodious, short, high trill, and it's repeated at intervals, and then along with a downward slide of the voice. Next is the ballet of the unhatched chicks. Now think about that, the ballet of unhatched chicks. It's inspired by a sketch that depicted baby chicks trying to hatch from their shells. This is by Mussorgsky, and he's masterful in his depiction of these chicks and their clucking antics. Last 2 pieces that Dr. Goodlow will perform were inspired by the flights and actions of different types of birds. Composers who lived around the turn of the 20th century were often known for their depictions of nature, and their music was very popular in the parlors of homes across America and Europe. I'll ask that you would hold your applause until she has completed the 4 pieces. Let's welcome Dr. Cindy Goodlow.
one of the questions that I get most often, and that I got tonight, is what's my favorite bird? And I've been all over the world birding, and I've seen some absolutely amazing things. I've been in the Peruvian Amazon and been absolutely intimidated and inundated by nature in ways that I never thought I could be. I've been in South Africa and seen the Kalahari in Botswana. I've been to high mountain peaks, and I've been in Loess Swamp. And so when I get that question, what's your favorite bird? There's a hard decision to make. And so I would like to say right now, for everyone in earshot, my favorite birds are the ones with feathers. And so it's all of them. And I like to think that everybody has a bird story. If you think about it, you have a bird story. Even if it's the leg of chicken that you ate for dinner, it's a bird story. Some bird stories are good and enjoyable and give us pleasant thoughts. Other bird stories aren't so pleasant and don't always give us the best thoughts. But one of the things that birds do is that birds often allow us to travel to places that maybe we wish we could be. If you think about what a bird is, if you think about what a sparrow is, if you think about something that you could mail for regular postage, but that has a beating heart, a thinking brain, and the ability to cross continents on wings that weigh as much as a couple of paper clips, then I think that's a being to be admired. And I think admiration in its most intense form is called love. Love is the feathered thing, a tundra swan flying across full moon's cold light, a wood thrush singing deep in red buds blushing spring, wing of wandering owls sweeping Arctic white. Love is the wild place, wind-swept shore where tide tosses time, where cypress swamps ink wet reflection, old field languishes, broom sedge burnishes gold in autumn setting sun. Love is humid summer's last crush, cicadas humming choir and leaf's first blush. It is verdance to vermilion, warblers wandering by guiding star. Limitless is a faraway place way beyond the rock-strewn ridge named Possibility. It's over there through a tangle-thick forest the old ones call Maybe. It is a fortnight's trudge through what could be, and at least as far as a strong man can chunk a stone, and straight as the crow flies. It is a hard, tough row across the mind's breath, a frog's hair from probable and head high from unreachable. You can't get there from here, but you sure can get here from there. Unfurl the map, aim the compass well, 'cause true north does lie. Dead reckon instead on your own reality and find yourselves there. At the end of it all, to be loved and loving, that is what will be grand. Children chattering and grown to good, woodlands walked and wandered, surf sauntered through, trees scaled to spy on the waking wood, streaking stars hauling wishes through an ink-black sky. a lingering embrace. The cold night in the desert when I first heard the coyote cry. So the poems that I write, I call them flash poems, and I'll tell you that many times the vision that many people have of poets, is people sitting down with quill pens, maybe in some quiet corner and writing. Truth be told, I write most of my poems on my smartphone. I call them flash poems because I think poetry is, in one sense, the truest form of written expression. That unedited, unfiltered, it's the feeling that flows out in words. It's the pictures that we paint with our minds. Just as song moves us, so can words, so can poetry. I saw their pale feathered forms flying through the glow of a waxing bay moon. I could feel their wild hearts' murmurings. I longed as they did for other places far away but close to heart. I took flight in that swan dream. I took flight and sailed with kindred spirits over salt marsh and fallow field. The earth, landscape sprawled in space but flattened in time, passed beneath the folding and unfolding of my own wings. I was of it all and yet not a part of anything that was. I murmured too. I murmured a sweet and sad swan song, whispering in the way that wild wing things do, of wanderings and wantings and wishings for the felt but unseen. In my dream flight, my wings whooshed, and my voice murmured, but my swan soul moaned, and the peeping frogs peeped from their ponds, and the tide rose and fell on the ocean's swell, because desire deemed it so. In that swan dream, as I flew across the waxing bay moon, my breast ached with strokes urgent rode against imagined sky, and yet, when I woke, I could not fly.
We're going to hear now from the Southern Wesleyan University Concert Choir. They're going to sing two selections for us, very different selections, as you'll soon find out. The first song they're going to sing for us, as you see in your program, is called The Beautiful Songbird. Now, The Beautiful Songbird is from a set of 3 American haiku. As you know, those are a particular type of poetry. They were all written by Greg Lapp. He is a composer who was living in Fresno, California at the time. I'd like to read for you the text of this first song that they're going to sing. The beautiful songbird flies through the endless sky, death to Chevrolet. Quite an absurd kind of poem. It has the requisite 17 syllables for a traditional haiku, but they're divided, not divided up in the normal 3 phases of 5, 7, and 5 syllables. However, there is the haiku style of the syllables and the juxtaposition of contrasting elements. And in this song, there are the elements of effortless flying of birds with the ugliness of death. Now, Mr. Lapp developed this song in conjunction with his high school students in his chorus class while he was living in Bakersfield, California. So as the choir performs this, I want you to be aware that, that it is in 20th century, highly dissonant style. And you're going to hear the choir mimic the hooting of owls and also the cawing of crows. And I'm telling you now, just be aware. There are some very non-traditional and even scary sounds that are used in this presentation. Now, following that, they're going to sing a very lyrical rendition of A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square. Now, the lyrics for this were written shortly before the outbreak of World War II by Eric Maschwitz. He was in a popular fishing and resort town in France when he wrote these words. The music was written by Manning Sherwin, and the first performance of this song was in 1939. Since then, it's been performed by many artists, including Nat King Cole, Bobby Darin, Mel Torme, Rod Stewart, Glenn Miller, Perry Como, Frank Sinatra, Harry Connick Jr. The arrangement that you're going to hear tonight was done by the famous vocal jazz arranger Gene Perling, and it was performed by the Manhattan Transfer. And also, they won a Grammy for this in 1981. So as you listen to the second song, visualize a setting in the tumultuous time of war in Europe during the 1940s. And then think, even in the uncertainty of war and pain and sorrow, the song of a bird called people to love and to beauty. His Eye is on the Sparrow is one of the most influential and often recorded gospel hymns in America. The words were penned by Sevilla Martin, who was born in Nova Scotia but died in Atlanta, Georgia. Sevilla and her husband Walter, who was a minister, often wrote gospel songs for revival meetings. Walter and his wife served in various locations in North Carolina and then eventually moved and settled in Atlanta in 1919. Sevilla Martin and her husband met a couple in 1905. This couple both suffered from crippling diseases. They were confined to wheelchairs for most of their life. Despite all of this, they lived happy Christian lives and were often an inspiration to other people. When they were asked the secret of their happiness, the woman responded, "His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me." From those words and that encounter, Sevilla then wrote this one of the most famous gospel hymns in America. This hymn has offered comfort to many people throughout the years, and it continues to touch hearts today. Professor Jane Dill plays "His Eye is on the Sparrow."
First, I'd like to thank everyone for sharing your musical talents with us all tonight. Can we have another round of applause? You'll hear me talk frequently about connecting dots. And our lives are dots connected from being born to life to death. These are all dots that we connect. In the midst of life, we meet others, and there are events that help us connect these dots, hopefully into full, productive lives. Ken is one of those dots for me, and a person who I've met who's made my life better. This evening is another dot connected in that life, and so I thank you for including me in this portion of your lives. And what I'd like to do now is share a little bit from a chapter that I call New Religion. And I quote Rachel Carson, the famous environmentalist, the woman who really set us on the path to thinking about nature and the environment, our environment, in a different way. And Rachel Carson said, "It is not half so important to know as to feel. It is not half so important to know as to feel." Lecturing has always come easily to me, backed by the technical, the theoretical, a few supporting slides, and a captive audience of college students or peers. I've given hundreds of presentations in classrooms and professional meetings. But after many years of stale introductions, methods, results, and conclusions, I began to wonder, was anyone really listening? And if there were real reasons for them to do so. In lecture after lecture, I regurgitated factoids and data that were readily available in the readings. And between the slides of animals on the verge of extinction and of tropical rainforests being slashed, burned, and mowed down by cattle, I sounded to my own ears like the apocalyptic preachers at the church where I had grown up. I looked into my audience and saw drawn expressions of boredom and dread. Day after day, semester after semester, year after year, I droned on. Yes, I was presenting the facts. Yes, I was publishing the facts. But it seemed to me that facts never created the motivation to make things better. Conservation to me had always implied caring, some semblance of selflessness for those coming after me. I craved change, but wasn't quite sure where or how to satisfy that desire. In the midst of the yearning, I took a group of my students to Warren Wilson, a small working hands liberal arts college in the mountains of western North Carolina, to see the preeminent biologist E.O. Wilson speak. I am not a star chaser, but Dr. Wilson, a fellow Southerner and naturalist, is a supernova, a once-in-a-generation mind whose ideas shine like the sun in the conservation world. He introduced the ideas of biodiversity and biophilia to the world. He's on par with Aldo Leopold and Rachel Carson. I didn't want to miss the chance to see him, and some of the students felt the same. As we gathered in the chapel that night, the pews were overflowing. We found a few vacant spots on the floor in front. Dr. Wilson, a tall, slim, gray-haired grandfather of a man, soon emerged and mounted a pulpit that looked like the bow of a ship. Standing above but almost within the audience, he spoke softly of the need to notice. There weren't any statistics, graphs, or scatter plots. There were no slides or pictures of devastated forests and animals dying in traps. His voice, even amplified through the microphone, never rose above the quiet surge of low-tide surf. Yet he was irresistibly compelling, totally magnetic. I was entranced. I looked around. Everyone else was drawn in too. There were nods of approval, and more than a few eyes glistened with tears. It was church like I had never imagined it. There was no damnation. There was no guilt, but simply a heartfelt plea to notice, nurture, to love. Within the past couple of years, I've taken notice. I've given fewer and fewer p-value presentations. More and more, I find myself taking the hard data and wrapping it in genuine caring. The science is critical. It always comes first for many of us, but action has to come behind it. I try to connect the conservation dots. Aldo Leopold's admonitions to be one of those who cannot live without wild things, to keep all the parts, to listen to the mountain, and preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. All of these things fly round and round inside my head like swifts swirling before the roosts. The words are flocks of inspiration that I want to migrate from my mouth into the heads and hearts of others. I shake hands less now and give more hugs. I exchange more heartbeats than business cards. The energy is palpable. I can feel the brackish Bay Marsh tide rising and the prairie wind sweeping through crowds that crave it. I can see the full moon glowing in kindred spirits' eyes. If teaching is preaching, I've become a warmer, gentler pastor. Maybe it's appropriate that those years have given me a new spiritual release too. I've settled into a more comfortable place with the idea of nature and God being inextricably intertwined. A warbler migrating over hundreds of miles of land and ocean to sing in the same tree, once again, each spring is as miraculous to me as any dividing sea. Doing good things for and revering nature are just acts. There is righteousness in conserving things, staving off extinction, and simply admiring the song and beauty of a bird. In my moments of confession in front of strangers, talking about my love of something much greater than any of us, I become a freer me. Each time I am reborn. And so for all of those years of running from anything resembling the religion I had grown up with and all the scientific training that now tells me to doubt anything outside of the prescribed confidence limits, I find myself defined these days more by what I cannot see than by what I can. As I wander into the pre-dawn dusk of an autumn wood, I feel the presence of things beyond flesh, beyond bone, beyond my blood. My being expands to fit the limitlessness of the wild world. My senses flush to full, and my heartbeat quickens with the knowledge that I am not alone. And so for me, it becomes about love, why I do what I do. As a scientist, as a conservation scientist, as one who talks to students, who talks to peers about how we save the world, how we save, in some instances, ourselves from ourselves, I think it comes down to what I like to think of as the four-letter word that science forgot. It's called love. Love is a barter, bits of affection traded for pieces of adoration. It is desire doled out on the whippoorwill's summer wanting. It is our craving for the meadowlark's ringing song, our longing for spring's greening from our sun-starved spirits down to our bare-toed roots. We seek the winding path and wander until we find the sweet spots. Blackwater cypress swamp, Montana tall grass prairie sweep, that place where moonlight glancing off of tide-slicked stones maybe made us weep. We want the wild soul, and a shadow-dwelling wood thrush heaps it all on us in self-harmonizing sonata. We revel in wildflowers' bloom, marvel in the migratory sojourns of birds dodging falling stars. Sink yourselves deep in the dizzying dance of pollen-drunk bees. Find hope in the relieved canopy of the tallest bottomland trees. Wind and water, storm and surf, they can move us to better ends. Therein is the turn on. It's the honey-sweet seduction. Nature asks only that we notice. That we notice a sunrise here, a sunset there. The surge, that overwhelming, inexplicable thing in a swallow's joyous flight, or the dawning of new light that melds heart and head into sensual soul in that moment of truly seeing. That is love.